Rain battered the windows of the Harrow Inn, turning the world outside to a blur of slate and silver, while within, the taproom glowed with the heat of a roaring fire and the swirl of voices. Juliana Harrow, sleeves rolled, her apron tied briskly, moved smoothly among her guests, balancing a tray of steaming cider and a teapot for Mrs. Rowley's knitting circle. The regulars, local farmers, a pair of market women, and a few tradesmen huddled close to the hearth, swapping stories over tankards. The air was thick with the scent of roasting beef and wet wool, the familiar comfort of home. This was her world, and she kept it well. The staff, bustling about Tommy with his ever-present smudge of flour. Molly the maid, balancing an impossible stack of crockery, looked to her for direction. Even the gentry, when they stopped on their way to grander halls, learned to respect the young woman who owned the Harrow. Or so she'd thought. The door crashed open, a gust of wind scattering rushes and drawing every head. In the threshold, framed by the storm, stood a man in a sodden greatcoat, mud spattered to his knees, dark hair plastered to his brow. He paused, surveying the room with narrowed eyes, then strode in as if the inn were his own. Juliana moved to greet him, brushing a stray curl back behind her ear. "Good evening, sir. Welcome." He dropped his travel bag with a thud near the door, not bothering to look at her. "A chamber, hot food, and a brandy, if you've anything better than the local swill." Tommy darted forward to take his coat, but the stranger shrugged him off. "I'll keep it. It's wet, and I don't trust the air in these places." Juliana's hand tightened on her tray. "Of course, sir. I'll see to it at once, if you'll follow." He flicked a coin onto her tray, not meeting her eyes. "Quickly, girl." It was only a shilling, but it landed with a sound that seemed to echo. For a moment, the taproom stilled. Mrs. Rowley's knitting needles paused mid-stitch. A pair of local squires, halfway through their game of cards, glanced over. Even Tommy, halfway to the kitchen, stopped dead in his tracks. Juliana looked at the coin, then at the man. His face, handsome but drawn, was set in a look of tired impatience. He had the air of one accustomed to being served, and never questioned. He did not see her. He saw only a girl in an apron, another servant to command. A flush crept up her neck, but her voice was steady. "Thank you, sir, but we do not accept tips from guests until they've had their supper. It's the custom here." He looked up, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were an unremarkable gray, but their coldness startled her. "I'm certain there are customs aplenty in these parts," he said, voice clipped. "I require immediate service, not lessons in etiquette." A ripple of laughter, nervous, not kind, ran through the room. Tommy's face burned with indignation, and Molly's mouth tightened. Rowley bristled, her knitting forgotten. "Very well, sir," Juliana said, fighting to keep her tone even. She set the tray down on the polished counter, picked up the coin, and pressed it back into his palm. "You'll find the Harrow prides itself on a different sort of welcome." He looked at her, really looked, as if only now seeing the quiet confidence in her stance, the way the staff's eyes flicked between them. Perhaps he saw, too, the faint trace of her late father's features in her chin, the same jaw that never yielded. For a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or the first prick of shame, but he recovered. "Then I shall expect to be impressed, Miss Harrow." She let the name settle, enjoying the way it made his brows rise. "I am the proprietor." A pause, thick with meaning. One of the squires whistled low. Tommy grinned, almost daring the man to dig himself deeper. The stranger's cheeks colored, but he inclined his head. "My apologies, Miss Harrow. I did not realize." "I'm sure you did not." Juliana's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Will you be wanting supper, or is the local swill insufficient?" His mouth twitched at the edge, as if he might laugh, but he only nodded. "Supper, and the best brandy you have, if you please." She turned on her heel, chin high, and signaled Molly to fetch the roast. Behind her, the room exhaled, the spell broken, the fire crackling once more. Voices picked up, but the talk was sharper, glances darting between the new guest and their hostess. In the kitchen, Juliana set about carving the beef with more force than necessary. Molly whispered, "He's got nerve, that one. Looks like he's never lifted a finger in his life." "He'll manage," Juliana muttered, but her hands trembled as she arranged the tray. The coin, still warm from his hand, glinted on the sideboard. She returned to the taproom, placing the plate and glass before him with measured grace. He looked up, studying her with a curiosity that made her uneasy. "Thank you, Miss Harrow." She inclined her head. "If there's anything more you require, you need only ask." His gaze lingered on her, as if searching for something to say, but she refused to give ground. Instead, she turned to tend her other guests, aware of every glance, every whisper that followed her. Mrs. Rowley caught her sleeve as she passed. "You handled that well, my dear," she murmured, though her eyes were bright with worry. "But you mustn't let him or any like him forget who you are. These folk will gossip, and that Fenwick boy is sure to make something of it." Juliana drew herself up. "Let him try." Across the room, Mr. Silas Fenwick entered, shaking rain from his hat, his eyes quick to take in the stranger at the central table and the tension that lingered in the air. He made straight for Juliana, lowering his voice. "Trouble from the road, Miss Harrow? I can have a word, if you wish." She forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Fenwick, but I believe I have it well in hand." His gaze flicked to the stranger, then back to her, lingering. "I do hope he's not here to cause mischief. Some men think a coin can buy anything, even respect." "He will learn our ways soon enough," she said, dismissing him with a nod. Fenwick's lips pursed, but he stepped away, inserting himself among the card players with a word of warning too soft for her to catch. The stranger, she caught his name from the register as she passed. Lord Nathaniel Ashcombe ate in silence, his manner subdued. At intervals, he glanced at Juliana, his expression unreadable. As the evening wore on, the storm showed no sign of relenting. Guests grumbled about the weather, speculating that no coach would get through till morning. Tommy, bold with indignation, served Lord Ashcombe's next drink with a flourish, deliberately sloshing a bit over the rim. "Your brandy, sir. Finest in the county." Ashcombe accepted it with a wry smile. "My thanks. I trust you'll send the bill to my room." "Of course, sir," Tommy said, then added, "The room's Miss Harrow's best. She sees to everything herself. Wouldn't want you thinking she's just a maid." A murmur of laughter, sharper this time, circled the taproom. Ashcombe's eyes narrowed at the boy, but he said nothing. Juliana's pulse hammered. She was grateful to Tommy, but the balance of her authority felt precarious now, the air brittle with tension. She could see the staff's pride in her and the guests' curiosity, some sympathetic, others just hungry for gossip. When the last of the supper plates were cleared, Mrs. Rowley drew Juliana aside. "You must be careful, love. Folk will talk. I've heard whispers already. Fenwick telling the squires you were insulted in your own house." Juliana's jaw set. "Let them talk. I will not be cowed in my own home." Mrs. Rowley's eyes softened. "No, you will not. But you must be wise as well as bold. The gentry watch for any slip, and the staff take their cue from you." Juliana nodded, aware of the weight of her aunt's words, and glanced across the room at Lord Ashcombe. He sat alone, staring into his glass, his unreadable eyes still fixed on her. As midnight neared and the wind howled outside, she signaled to Molly to begin readying the guest rooms. Lord Ashcombe rose as she passed, stopping her with a polite, if awkward, bow. "Miss Harrow," he said quietly, "I regret my earlier presumption. I had a long journey and—" She cut him off, her voice gentle but firm. "We all have burdens, my lord. You are welcome here, as any traveler would be. But remember, this is my house. My father built it, and I keep it. Those who stay must honor that." He held her gaze, and this time she saw something more than pride in his eyes, perhaps understanding, or the first flicker of respect. "Understood," he said, voice low. She stepped aside, sweeping her apron smooth, and let him pass up the stairs. Only when he was gone did she allow herself a long, steadying breath. The taproom slowly emptied, guests retiring or braving the storm for home, the last embers in the grate flickering low. Juliana lingered in the hush, finger tracing the edge of the counter, where the shilling had fallen. The staff gathered, Tommy full of bluster, Molly with her quiet smile, Mrs. Rowley with her knitting. "Well, that's a night we'll remember," Molly murmured. Juliana smiled tiredly, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Let them remember. Tomorrow the sun will rise, and the harrow will stand." But in her heart, she knew the air had shifted. The tale of the proud lord and the innkeeper's daughter would be on every tongue by morning. And whether for good or ill, nothing would be quite the same again. Dawn came slowly, grey and sodden, leaking through the thick glass panes of the Harrow Inn. The world outside had not yet shaken off the storm. Puddles pooled in the ruts of the lane, and a thin mist curled in the hollows. Inside, the inn was quiet, but not at peace. The scent of damp wool and strong coffee hung beneath the low beams as staff moved about in the hush before the day's business. Juliana was already up, sleeves rolled, her hair pinned with more haste than art. She moved through the kitchen, checking bread and bacon, giving Molly gentle instructions and sending Tommy to the stables with a lantern and a warning to mind the mud. Every so often, she paused to look out at the road, hoping to see the silhouette of a coach on the horizon. But the lane remained empty. No carriage would be coming soon. The storm had left the nearest bridge impassable. The guests were stranded, and so, it seemed, was Lord Nathaniel Ashcombe. She found him in the parlour, standing by the window, gazing at the rain-soaked yard. His coat was gone, replaced by an impeccably cut waistcoat, but his boots still bore the traces of yesterday's journey. He turned at her approach, his manner formal but less brittle than before. "Good morning, Miss Harrow." His tone was careful, as if measuring each word. "Good morning, my lord," she replied, keeping her voice even. "I'm afraid the roads are still unfit for travel. You'll be obliged to remain with us a while longer." He inclined his head. "It seems I am at your mercy, then." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Mercy is not our trade, my lord. Only hospitality." She gestured toward a chair near the hearth, where the fire was trying valiantly to dry a rack of sodden boots. "Will you take some breakfast?" He hesitated a moment, then nodded. She poured coffee from the pot herself, sliding a cup to him across the polished table. For a few heartbeats, they sat in silence, the air thick with the memory of last night's slight. The quiet was broken by Mrs. Rowley, who swept in from the hall, her shawl trailing and her knitting already in hand. She offered Lord Ashcombe a nod that was both gracious and assessing. "I trust you slept well, my lord?" she inquired, her tone civil but edged. He set down his cup. "I did, thank you. Your inn is most comfortable." Juliana caught her aunt's eye, a silent message passing between them. Mrs. Rowley, satisfied for the moment, bustled off to inspect the breakfast table, leaving the two alone once more. Lord Ashcombe cleared his throat, as if bracing himself. "Miss Harrow, I must again apologize for my conduct last night. It was not my intention to insult you." Juliana studied him, searching for mockery and finding only discomfort. "Intent and result are not always the same, my lord." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "No, they are not." Before she could reply, the door opened, and a gust of cold air swept in with Mr. Fenwick, his boots freshly polished, his hair neatly combed. He greeted Juliana with a bright, too eager smile. "Good morning, Miss Harrow. I trust the inn survived the storm?" "Quite well, Mr. Fenwick. You'll find breakfast in the dining room." He glanced at Lord Ashcombe, then back at Juliana, lowering his voice. "I hear the road is still out. You'll have your hands full with these guests, if you need assistance." "I shall manage," Juliana said softly, but firmly. Fenwick's smile faltered, and he turned his attention to Lord Ashcombe. "I don't believe we've been introduced, sir." Ashcombe rose, offering a restrained bow. "Lord Nathaniel Ashcombe, at your service." Fenwick's eyebrows shot up, and he turned to Juliana with a glint in his eye. "A lord, is he? My. We don't often see such company in these parts." Juliana's jaw tightened. "The Harrow welcomes all travelers, Mr. Fenwick." Fenwick grinned, but there was nothing warm in it. "Of course, still, a titled guest is a novelty. You'll be the talk of the village by noon, my lord. If you intend to remain, I trust you'll find our customs charming, if a little rustic." Ashcombe's mouth quirked, but he said nothing. Fenwick leaned closer to Juliana, voice low. If you'd like, I could see to any arrangements you require. Some guests take liberties, if not reminded of their place. Juliana's eyes flashed. Thank you, Mr. Fenwick, but the Harrow is my concern. Fenwick shrugged, but his gaze lingered on Lord Ashcombe with open skepticism. He drifted off, making a show of greeting the other guests, but not before whispering something to Mrs. Rowley that made her lips purse in concern. Juliana watched him go, her shoulders stiffening. Lord Ashcombe finished his coffee and set the cup aside, fidgeting with his signet ring. Your Mr. Fenwick seems very devoted, he observed, voice neutral. He is a friend of the family, Juliana replied, perhaps a shade too briskly. There was an awkward pause, broken only by the sound of Tommy clattering in from the stables, boots and breeches caked with mud. Miss, the bridge is out for certain. Old Mr. Holloway's cart's stuck firm, and the wheelwright says no one'll pass till the men can haul it clear. Juliana nodded. Thank you, Tommy. See to the guests' horses and make sure the kitchen fire stays hot. Tommy glanced warily at Lord Ashcombe, then grinned at Juliana. If you need me to keep an eye on anyone, just say the word. Juliana stifled a laugh. I think we'll manage. Go on with you. When Tommy had gone, Juliana turned back to Lord Ashcombe, her face gentling. You see, my lord, you are well and truly stranded. He smiled. A real one this time, if a little rueful. So it appears. I'm at the mercy of Miss Harrow and her loyal garrison. She met his gaze, surprised to find herself smiling in return. Then perhaps you will understand why a coin tossed at a maid or an innkeeper is not quite the welcome we cherish here. He inclined his head. I do understand, and I shall endeavor to prove myself a better guest. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of a pair of farmers from the neighboring village, dripping rain and stamping mud from their boots. Word traveled swiftly in such places, and within moments, the parlor filled with talk of the storm, the broken bridge, and the noble guest caught by the weather. Fenwick reappeared, this time with Mrs. Rowley in tow. Miss Harrow, a word, if you please. Juliana excused herself and followed them to the corner of the room. Fenwick's voice dropped to a confidential murmur. You must be careful with such company, Juliana. The villagers will talk. Already I've heard speculation. He mistook you for a maid, insulted you before your own staff. People will wonder how you mean to answer it. Mrs. Rowley's eyes were full of worry. Your good name, my dear. It would not do for anyone to think you less than mistress in your own house. Juliana felt the weight of their concern, the invisible chains of reputation tightening around her. She glanced across the room at Lord Ashcombe, who was now speaking quietly with Tommy near the fire, his manner less aloof than before. Thank you for your advice, Juliana said, keeping her voice calm. But I will not be cowed by gossip, nor will I turn out a guest into the storm for the sake of appearances. Fenwick's smile was thin. No one suggests you should, but you must strike a balance. Authority must be seen, not merely claimed. Mrs. Rowley touched her arm, her fingers cool. Your father would have wanted you to be careful, darling. Juliana patted her aunt's hand. I am careful, but I will not let last night's foolishness define me. She returned to the parlor, her decision made. Lord Ashcombe was just setting aside a mug of cider, Tommy hovering nearby. She crossed to them, her manner composed. My lord, may I speak with you privately? Ashcombe looked surprised, but rose at once, following her to her small office behind the taproom. The room was lined with ledgers and maps, her father's old pipe resting on the windowsill. She shut the door behind them, facing him squarely. Lord Ashcombe, there's no sense in pretending nothing happened last night. My staff and guests all witnessed your error. I must insist you treat me and my house with the respect due, lest my authority be questioned further. Ashcombe flushed. You are entirely correct, Miss Harrow. I was in the wrong. I am not accustomed to being questioned, but that hardly excuses me. She nodded, searching his face. I do not require your deference, only your understanding. The Harrow is my home. My staff look to me. Should they see me slighted, I lose more than pride. He bowed his head, genuine remorse in his expression. Then I give you my word, before any who care to witness it, that it will not happen again. if there is any way I might repair the damage. Juliana considered, then spoke softly. You can begin by greeting the staff this morning, as you would any host. And if you would join me in the common room for breakfast, it would go some way towards setting things right. He straightened, a glimmer of humor in his eyes. It would be my pleasure, Miss Harrow. She smiled, a real one this time, small, but freely given. Very well, my lord. Let us begin anew. When they returned to the dining room together, side by side, a hush fell over the staff and guests. Mrs. Rowley's eyes widened. Fenwick watched with narrowed interest. Tommy grinned outright. Juliana took her place at the head of the table, Lord Ashcombe at her right. She poured his tea herself, and he thanked her with a nod that was noticed by all present. The balance in the room had shifted. The slight had been acknowledged, the boundaries reset. But as Juliana glanced around the table, she knew the matter was far from settled. The gossips would find new fuel, and the rivalries had only grown sharper. Yet for the first time since the storm began, she felt something like hope. And as the rain eased at last, and a watery sun broke through the clouds, the Harrow Inn buzzed with the promise of a day none would soon forget. The dining room of the Harrow Inn was filled with the morning's pale sunlight, glancing off polished wood and white linen. The air was thick with the aroma of fresh bread and the faint, sweet tang of apple preserves. Juliana stood by the sideboard, her hands moving swiftly as she arranged teacups, her mind only half on the task. The household was unusually quiet. Even the staff seemed to sense that the day carried more weight than most. Lord Ashcombe entered, his step hesitant but determined, no longer the grand figure who had swept in from the storm. He paused, scanning the room, then approached her with a nod. "Good morning, Miss Harrow," he said quietly, his tone stripped of all pretense. "Good morning, my lord," she replied, meeting his gaze. A handful of guests were already gathered at the long table, Mrs. Rowley with her knitting mister. Fenwick, reading the society pages of an old gazette, and a pair of local gentlemen who had lingered after the storm. Conversation flickered, then died as Lord Ashcombe took his place beside Juliana. Even Tommy, usually bold as brass, moved about with a wary silence. Ashcombe cleared his throat. "May I offer my thanks again for your hospitality? I fear I've caused you no end of trouble." Juliana managed a small, wry smile. "The Harrow is used to weathering storms, my lord, of all kinds." There was a soft rustle as Mrs. Rowley set aside her knitting. "Miss Harrow is very capable, Lord Ashcombe," she said, her tone gently protective. "She has managed this house as well as any man could have, and far better than most." Fenwick looked up, his eyes sharp. "Indeed, the Harrow stands as a credit to her name. Not every visitor appreciates the care that goes into such an establishment." A faint flush crept up Ashcombe's neck, but he did not rise to the bait. Instead, he reached for the bread, tearing a piece more forcefully than necessary. "I have much to learn about country customs. Perhaps you and your staff might teach me." Tommy, passing behind him with a jug of milk, could not resist. "We could teach you to sweep a floor, my lord, or to greet a lady with respect." The table erupted in nervous laughter. Juliana's eyes twinkled, but she shook her head at Tommy, who grinned and scurried away. Ashcombe smiled, rueful. "I believe I deserve that." Juliana poured his tea, her movements graceful. "We value humility here, my lord. It's a useful trait." The tension eased, conversation returning as guests tucked in. For a moment, normalcy reigned, until Fenwick, ever watchful, set down his gazette and addressed Juliana in a voice pitched to carry. "I wonder, Miss Harrow, if you intend to host the gathering this evening as planned. The village expects it, but with such unpredictable company, one never knows what mischief may arise." Rowley bristled. "There is no reason to cancel. The Harrow has weathered worse than a little gossip." Fenwick's gaze lingered on Ashcombe, then drifted to Juliana. "Still, it would be wise to remember one's place. Reputation is a fragile thing in these parts." Juliana's jaw tightened. "The Harrow will host as usual, Mr. Fenwick. Our doors remain open to all who behave as guests." Ashcombe's expression hardened. And for the first time, he spoke directly to Fenwick. "I assure you, sir, I mean neither Miss Harrow nor her house any further trouble." Fenwick's smile was thin. "I hope not. It would be most unfortunate if last night's confusion gave rise to further misunderstanding." A hush fell, the air prickling with unspoken challenge. Juliana felt every eye upon her, waiting to see how she would answer. She stood, her voice clear and steady. "This is my house, Mr. Fenwick. I am mistress here, and I trust my staff and my guests to honor that. Any who cannot are welcome to seek shelter elsewhere." A ripple of approval passed through the room. Even Mrs. Rowley nodded, her eyes shining with pride. Fenwick inclined his head, conceding the point, but his eyes promised the matter was not finished. Breakfast resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Lord Ashcombe glanced at Juliana, his expression uncertain. She caught his gaze, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. Not exactly forgiveness, but the beginning of understanding. After breakfast, as the guests drifted out, Ashcombe lingered near the window. Juliana approached, careful to keep her voice low. "You handled yourself well. Fenwick can be persistent." "He seems to think I am a threat," Ashcombe replied. "To you or to your house?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "He wishes to protect both, I think. But his methods are not always subtle, nor are they always welcome." Ashcombe looked at her, truly looked, and she saw the man beneath the fine waistcoat and signet ring. "I would not see you harmed, Miss Harrow, by me or by anyone." She offered a faint smile. "That is kind of you, my lord, but I have managed on my own for some time." He nodded, then almost shyly extended his hand. "May I help with the preparations for the gathering? It seems the least I can do." Juliana's brows rose in surprise, but she took his hand, her own small and steady in his. "Very well, but be warned, the work is not as genteel as you may be accustomed." A spark of humor lit his eyes. "I look forward to the challenge." Their hands lingered a moment too long before she withdrew, cheeks warmed by more than the fire. The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of activity. Ashcombe set tables, polished silver, and even carried wood for the kitchen fire under Tommy's supervision, earning good-natured jeers and more than one sly comment from the staff. Molly observed to anyone who would listen that even a lord can learn to sweep a hearth if he's shown proper. By midday, the inn buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread through the village that Lord Ashcombe was not only staying at the Harrow, but working alongside the staff. Some found it comical, others a scandal, but all agreed it was a tale worth repeating. In the pantry, Mrs. Rowley cornered Juliana, her knitting in hand, her expression serious. "You are playing a dangerous game, child. Letting that man serve in your house as any common servant. What will people say?" Juliana wiped her hands on her apron. "Let them say what they will, Aunt. He offered, and I mean to let him." Mrs. Rowley sighed, clicking her needles together. "You are your father's daughter, stubborn as any mule. But be careful. Men like Ashcombe are not made for our world. They may amuse themselves, but it is we who pay the price." Juliana's eyes softened. "He is not the only one being tested, Aunt." Mrs. Rowley looked at her a long moment, then pressed a kiss to her cheek. "Just remember who you are, and do not let anyone, lord or laborer, take that from you." Outside, Ashcombe was helping Tommy stack kindling when Fenwick approached, hands in his immaculate gloves. "You seem very eager to impress, my lord," he drawled. Ashcombe straightened. "I simply wish to be of use." Fenwick's smile did not reach his eyes. "Be careful not to overstep. This house runs by different rules than your London clubs." Ashcombe met his gaze calmly. "I am learning, Mr. Fenwick. And I mean no harm to Miss Harrow or her house." Fenwick shrugged, but his words, pitched for Tommy's ears, lingered. "We shall see if the village is so forgiving." The day wore on, every corner of the inn bustling with preparation. As evening approached and lamps were lit, guests began to arrive for the gathering. The taproom filled with laughter, music, and the clink of glasses, but beneath it all, a current of watchfulness persisted. Juliana, moving among her guests, felt the eyes of the village upon her. Some greeted her with warmth, others with sly questions about her noble guest. Ashcombe, for his part, moved easily among the company, accepting both jest and jibe with good humor. though she sensed the effort it cost him. When supper was served, he took his seat by Juliana's side, their roles clear for all to see. The staff watched with pride, Fenwick with tight-lipped annoyance, and Mrs. Rowley with cautious hope. As she lifted her glass to toast the gathering, Juliana caught Ashcombe's eye. His look was steady, grateful. For the first time, it felt as though they were allies, not adversaries. The moment was not lost on the room. Whispers stirred, glances exchanged. The story had changed. The proud lord and the innkeeper's daughter were no longer adversaries, but something more complicated and perhaps more dangerous. When the meal ended and the company drifted into music and cards, Juliana felt the change settle around her like a new cloak. The lines had been redrawn. Respect had been publicly negotiated, but the price would soon be counted. As the lamps burned low and the last song faded, she realized that whatever storm had begun with a single shilling, it was far from over. And as Lord Ashcombe offered her his arm to lead her through the crowded taproom, she took it without hesitation, aware that every eye was on them, and that the next move was hers. The Harrow Inn glowed that evening with the soft light of countless candles, each flame mirrored in the polished brass of sconces and the glass of wine glasses. The great oak table was laden with cold meats, jellies, and fresh loaves, the kitchen's labor evident in every dish. Laughter and music from a traveling fiddler rolled between the walls. Villagers, tradesmen, and a scattering of modest gentry mixed easily, the storm's chaos now a tale for merriment rather than worry. Behind the scenes, Juliana moved through the swell of guests with quiet command. Her touch steadied a tray here, straightened a chair there, always with a smile or a kind word. She wore a gown of deep blue, plain but well cut, her dark hair swept back, her only ornament a silver locket that had belonged to her mother. As she passed, guests greeted her warmly, some with genuine respect, others with the sly curiosity reserved for those who had lately found the center of gossip. Lord Ashcombe, no longer in travel-stained clothes but in a crisp evening coat, moved among the guests as if born to it, though he kept close to Juliana's orbit. He fetched punch for Mrs. Rowley, exchanged pleasantries with a cluster of spinsters, and even endured a spirited debate on the merits of Devonshire cider with the local vicar. Yet every so often his gaze sought Juliana, as if he drew reassurance from the firmness of her presence. Tommy, cheeks scoured pink and hair slicked, darted between guests, ferrying plates and news in equal measure. Fenwick, immaculate as ever, stood by the sideboard with a glass of claret, his eyes never straying far from Juliana and her noble guest. The evening's ease was interrupted by a minor commotion near the hearth. Two children, emboldened by late hours and sticky pastries, collided, sending a plate of tarts tumbling to the floor. The children froze, faces pale. Their mothers gasped, apologies tripping over each other. But Juliana swept in, kneeling to gather the crumbs with a gentle laugh. "No harm done," she soothed, handing the children each a fresh tart. A gathering is not truly merry without a little chaos. The mothers relaxed, the children's eyes widened in relief, and a ripple of good humor spread through the room. Ashcombe, watching from a distance, smiled, admiration clear on his face. As Juliana rose, Fenwick stepped forward, offering his handkerchief. "You're too kind, Miss Harrow. Some would say you spoil them." She accepted the cloth, her smile polite. "A little kindness costs nothing, Mr. Fenwick, and it is well repaid." He lingered, lowering his voice, so only she could hear. "You manage a difficult balance, Juliana, but be careful. Generosity can be mistaken for weakness." She met his gaze coolly. "Only by those who would like to see me fail." He chuckled, not unkindly. "You have a sharp tongue. I admire it. But not all your guests are friends tonight." She glanced across the room, following his look to a pair of gentry wives whispering behind their fans. Their eyes flicked to Juliana, then away, their laughter edged. Fenwick continued. "They say Lord Ashcombe is making himself very much at home. Some wonder what keeps him here and what claim he might lay on your house and you." Juliana's cheeks colored, but she held her head high. "My house is my own, and my reputation will not be bartered." Fenwick's eyes lingered too long. "You are too proud, Juliana. Pride can be dangerous when you are surrounded by those who envy you." She did not answer, but strode away, returning to the heart of the gathering. Later, as the guests shifted to music and parlor games, a new crisis loomed. The vicar's wife, a formidable woman in lavender, approached Juliana with a frown. "Miss Harrow, I believe you have a problem in the kitchen. Mrs. Buckley says the pudding is ruined and the cook is in tears." Juliana excused herself and swept through the service door, finding Molly weeping over a blackened pan while Mrs. Buckley wrung her hands. The kitchen, usually a haven, was a chaos of smoke and clattering crockery. Taking command, Juliana knelt by Molly. "It's only a pudding, child. We'll make another. Here, help me measure the flour." Her calm steadied the staff, and soon laughter replaced panic. She rolled up her sleeves, stirring and instructing, and the pudding was saved by teamwork and a little spice. As the kitchen fell back into order, Ashcombe appeared in the doorway, his coat off, ready to help. "Is there aught I can do?" he asked, a touch of humility in his voice. Juliana smiled, pressing a bowl into his hands. "You may fetch this to the dining room and tell them the pudding will be worth the wait." He obeyed, and as he passed through the hall, the staff watched with wide eyes and secret smiles. Back in the main room, the incident became a tale for laughter, a nobleman bearing pudding, the innkeeper with flour on her cheek, the staff victorious over disaster. The gentry wives' whispers grew less sharp, and the villagers offered toast to the Harrows' hospitality. But the evening's peace was short-lived. As the last plates were cleared, and the company gathered for a game of charades, Fenwick slipped beside Juliana. "You are very gracious, my dear. But mark me, men like Ashcombe do not linger in little inns for the sake of the food alone." Juliana stiffened. "He is a guest, nothing more." Fenwick's smile was sly. "So you say, but others see more. If you are not careful, your name will be linked with his before the week is out, and there are those, myself among them, who would be sorry to see your reputation suffer for a stranger's amusement." Before Juliana could reply, Mrs. Rowley appeared at her elbow, knitting needles clicking with agitation. "What is he saying to you, love?" "Only warning me about the dangers of hospitality," Juliana replied, her voice cool. Rowley's eyes darted to Fenwick, then to Ashcombe, who stood laughing with Tommy and the vicar at the far side of the room. "He is right to worry, in his way. People talk. You must be careful, Juliana. I know you mean only kindness, but the world will see what it wishes. And Fenwick, he has his own stake in the matter." "I know what I am about, Aunt," Juliana replied, softer now. "But I cannot turn kindness into calculation. Nor will I ask a guest to sleep in the stable for the sake of others' comfort." Mrs. Rowley's hand squeezed hers. "Just do not let your heart run ahead of your good sense." As the games began, Ashcombe returned to Juliana's side. His sleeve bore a streak of flour, and his eyes were bright with laughter. "You run a tight ship, Miss Harrow. I have never seen a gathering rescued with such grace." She laughed, her earlier tension easing. "You have never seen a proper country gathering, my lord, if you think this is unusual." He leaned closer, his voice low. "Then I hope I may see more. I find myself enjoying your company a great deal." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world narrowed to the two of them, the laughter and music falling away. Before she could answer, Fenwick's voice rang out, sharp above the crowd. "A toast to the Harrow Inn and its most remarkable hostess. May she always know the difference between guest and friend." A ripple of laughter followed, some warm, some pointed. Juliana felt the color rise in her cheeks, but Ashcombe lifted his glass, meeting Fenwick's gaze with cool defiance. "To Miss Harrow," he said clearly, "who shows her guests more honor than they sometimes deserve, and who teaches even a foolish lord how to behave." The room stilled, then burst into applause. Juliana, caught between embarrassment and pride, inclined her head. "Thank you, my lord. The Harrow is always glad to offer a lesson in manners." Fenwick's eyes flashed, but the moment was lost to music and fresh laughter. As the gathering wound down, guests departing into the night, Juliana lingered by the door to see them off. Ashcombe stood beside her, offering his arm to Mrs. Rowley, steadying Tommy as he stumbled under a tray of dishes and finally turning to Juliana. "There will be talk after tonight," he murmured, softer than before. "Are you certain you wish to weather it?" She looked at him, her chin lifted. "Let them talk. I have nothing to be ashamed of." He smiled, admiration shining through. "Nor have you ever." The last guest gone, the inn quiet once more, Juliana watched as Fenwick retreated into the shadows, his gaze lingering with promise and warning both. Tonight, she had won the approval of many, but the lines of rivalry had been drawn sharper than ever, and the stakes for her heart and her house had grown unmistakably higher. Morning at the Harrow Inn dawned bright and cold, sunlight slanting through the frosted windows and illuminating every copper pot and polished floorboard. The laughter of the previous night lingered in memory, but the mood was different, brisk, purposeful, and undercut with tension that even the scent of fresh bread and strong tea could not wholly disguise. Juliana moved through her morning rounds, face composed, but eyes clouded with thought. She lingered at the ledger in her office, tallying accounts. When Mrs. Rowley entered, her knitting set aside for once. She shut the door firmly behind her. "My dear, you must speak with me a moment." Her tone was gentle but insistent. Juliana looked up, surprised. "Of course, Aunt. Is something amiss?" Mrs. Rowley drew a folded letter from her sleeve and handed it over. "This arrived early. Mr. Fenwick delivered it himself before breakfast. He seemed eager." Juliana accepted the letter, breaking the seal. Fenwick's hand was bold and precise. "My dearest Miss Harrow, it pains me to see your name and your house drawn so recklessly into the tongue-wagging of the county. I urge you, for your own good and the honor of your late father's memory, to consider your company and your future. My offer stands. A union between us would not only secure the Harrow, but shield you from the cruelties of idle talk. I would not see you cast as the heroine of some tawdry tale for others to savor. Yours devotedly." Juliana's lips pressed into a line. She set the letter on the desk. "He is very persistent." Rowley sat across from her, worry creasing her brow. "He means well in his fashion." "The village is buzzing, Juliana. There is talk of Lord Ashcombe, of impropriety, of your judgment. Fenwick's proposal would silence it." Juliana bristled. "At what cost? My independence? My heart? I have run this inn without a husband's name. I do not need saving." Her aunt's hand reached across the desk, gentle and insistent. "You have always been brave, but even the bravest are not immune to the world's judgment. If not for yourself, consider the staff, your future. Fenwick would keep you safe." Juliana turned to the window, watching Tommy chase the geese out of the kitchen garden. "Safe is not the same as happy, Aunt." Mrs. Rowley's voice softened. "There is another matter. Several guests have cancelled their bookings. They cite the gossip, the uncertainty. If the inn's reputation falters..." Juliana's heart clenched. The Harrow had always been full, its hearts warm even in lean times. The thought of empty rooms, of her father's legacy shrinking, made her throat tighten. A sharp knock interrupted them. Molly appeared, clutching her apron. "Miss Harrow, there's a visitor in the parlor, Mr. Fenwick. He says it's urgent." Juliana exchanged a look with her aunt, then nodded. "Very well, show him in." Fenwick entered, every inch the country gentleman, his gloves folded in one hand. He bowed. "Miss Harrow, Mrs. Rowley, forgive the intrusion." Juliana gestured to a chair, but remained standing. "What brings you so early, Mr. Fenwick?" He sat, smoothing his cuffs. "I come with concern for your well-being, and that of the Harrow. The talk in the village grows more pointed. Certain parties," he glanced at Mrs. Rowley, "question whether the inn remains a fit place for respectable company." Juliana's chin lifted. "We have always welcomed all who conduct themselves with decency, Mr. Fenwick." He sighed, feigning regret. "Decency is in the eye of the beholder, and the county's eyes are fixed here. Already, the vicar's wife has advised her circle to take their custom elsewhere. If this continues, you may find yourself in a very difficult position. Mrs. Rowley's hands tightened around her knitting. "What do you propose, sir?" Fenwick's gaze was steady. "A marriage between us would end the talk. You would be above reproach, and the Harrow's reputation restored. I would invest in the inn. The staff would keep their posts. Your aunt would want for nothing." Juliana's lips trembled, but she steadied herself. "And if I refuse?" A flicker of irritation passed across his face. "Then I fear the talk will grow worse. I would not wish to see you forced into hardship, Juliana, nor would I see your father's house diminished." The room was silent, the air heavy with expectation. At that moment, Lord Ashcombe's voice drifted through the open door, easy and unhurried as he spoke with Tommy in the hall. Fenwick's eyes narrowed. Your guest lingers, I see. Juliana's patience snapped. Lord Ashcombe is a guest, nothing more. I will not be bullied, Mr. Fenwick. Not by you, nor by the village. He rose, his manner cool. I'm sorry you see it as bullying. My offer stands. He bowed, then strode from the room, brushing past Ashcombe in the corridor. Ashcombe paused in the doorway, taking in the tense scene. Forgive me. I did not mean to intrude. Mrs. Rowley gathered her knitting and excused herself, casting Juliana a look full of worry and love. Juliana remained by the window, arms folded. Ashcombe approached, his tone gentle. Is all well? She forced a smile. As well as may be. The world is very interested in the Harrow this week. He regarded her a moment, then quietly said, If I am the cause, I can go. She shook her head, a strand of hair slipping loose. No, the talk would only change shape. I'm always to blame, it seems, either for being too proud, or too independent, or too kind. I will not be chased from my own house. He stepped closer. You should not be. I'm sorry for my part in this, Juliana. His use of her name startled her. It was the first time he had spoken it without formality. She met his gaze, and, for a moment, saw only kindness and concern. I do not regret your presence, my lord, she said quietly. Only the world's way of twisting what it does not understand. Ashcombe's expression softened. If there is anything I can do, she laughed, a note of bitterness in it. Can you silence a village, or change the mind of a man determined to save me for his own benefit? He smiled faintly. I am not so powerful, but I can listen, or carry wood, or help Molly in the kitchen. I can be useful, if nothing else. She tilted her head, the lines of worry easing. You are more useful than you know. A gentle knock sounded. Tommy's eager face peeked in. Miss, the baker's boy says the vicar's wife is telling folk not to come for dinner, and Molly wants to know if she should cut back on pies. Juliana's jaw set. No, Tommy. We are not closing the kitchen for anyone. If the vicar's wife wishes to starve herself, that is her concern. We will feed whoever comes. Tommy nodded, relief in his eyes. I'll tell Molly. Ashcombe watched him go, then looked at Juliana with admiration. You are remarkably brave, Miss Harrow. She smiled, weary but warmed. Bravery is sometimes all one has left. He hesitated, then offered, If you wish, I will stand beside you tonight publicly. Let the village see that I respect your house and you. Juliana searched his face, uncertainty flickering. And if that only makes things worse, then I will bear my share of it, he said. I have caused enough trouble. She considered, then nodded. Very well, my lord. Let us show the village that the Harrow harbors no shame. He bowed, but not mockingly. Your courage is catching, Miss Harrow. As he left, Juliana pressed her hand to her locket, feeling the old silver warm beneath her fingers. The day stretched ahead, its risks plain, fewer guests, sharper tongues, and Fenwick's proposal weighing on her heart. But she had chosen her path, and tonight, for good or ill, she would walk it in the open, with Lord Ashcombe at her side. By late afternoon, the inn's kitchen was alive with activity. Molly kneading dough at the table, Tommy splitting kindling outside the door, and Juliana with a cloth tied over her hair, sleeves rolled to her elbows, finishing the account books by the window. The air was warm and fragrant with yeast and roasting onions, but the mood was tense, for the parlor was emptier than usual, and the staff had overheard enough whispers to know that trouble brewed as surely as tea. Lord Ashcombe appeared in the doorway, his coat removed and shirt sleeves rolled back, a sight that turned more than one head. Miss Harrow, he said, a little breathless, Tommy says the wood wagon's stuck at the bottom of the lane. There's a wheel off, and the baker's boy is shouting for help. Juliana looked up sharply, her mind turning over the implications. The village depended on that wood, and the baker's boy was no mechanic. Tell Tommy I'll be there directly. Molly, mind the pies. Lord Ashcombe, if you're willing, fetch the heavy rope from the stable and meet me out front. He nodded at once, a glint of eagerness, perhaps gratitude in his eyes. Outside, the wind had picked up, tugging at Juliana's skirts as she strode down the muddy lane, boots squelching in the ruts. The wood wagon, a massive iron-rimmed affair, leaned dangerously to one side. The left wheel sunk deep in muck. The baker's boy wrung his cap in his hands, looking near to tears. Tommy was already there, cheeks red, tugging at the horse's bridle. "It's no good, miss," Tommy called. "The wheel's near snapped. We'll never get it out by muscle alone." Juliana studied the situation, then turned to Lord Ashcombe, who had arrived with the rope slung over his shoulder. "We'll need to brace the wagon and get the horse free first. Tommy, fetch the block and tackle." Ashcombe knelt beside the wheel, heedless of mud. "If we wrap the rope here," he suggested, "we can use the tree for leverage." Juliana nodded, grateful for his quick thinking. "Good. On my count, we'll heave together." Villagers soon gathered, drawn by the commotion. Fenwick appeared, gloves immaculate, arms folded, watching from a safe distance. Some of the gentry wives lingered farther up the lane, their voices carrying notes of doubt. But as Juliana and Ashcombe coaxed the horse clear, Tommy and the baker's boy guided the rope around the trunk, and a trio of farmhands added their muscle. The wagon shifted with a groan, and finally, gloriously, lurched free. A round of cheers broke out. Ashcombe, flushed and mud-splattered, grinned at Juliana. "You run a rescue as well as an inn, Miss Harrow." She laughed, breathless, the sound bright in the grey air. "We do what must be done." The baker's boy stammered his thanks, and Juliana clapped him on the shoulder. "Tell your mother the Harrow will send bread if you're short. We're all neighbors here." As the crowd dispersed, Fenwick lingered, his gaze lingering on Juliana. "You risk much, throwing in your lot with every stray trouble that comes down the lane." She wiped mud from her hands, chin lifted. "I do what's right for my house, Mr. Fenwick, and for the village." He gave a thin smile. "Some would say you seek to impress the wrong audience." She met his eyes, unflinching. "I seek no audience, only to keep my word." Ashcombe stepped forward, his posture unconsciously protective. "Miss Harrow's word is worth more than a dozen reputations built on fear, Mr. Fenwick." Fenwick's eyes narrowed, but he merely bowed and turned away. Juliana turned to Ashcombe, her voice gentling. "Thank you for your help, my lord. You might have ruined your boots." He glanced down, then laughed. "I believe they were beyond saving long before today." The two of them walked back toward the inn, the lane emptying as villagers returned to their homes. Juliana's steps slowed, and she glanced sideways. "You need not always come to my rescue, you know." Ashcombe's gaze was earnest. "You rescued me first, Miss Harrow. I only hope to repay the debt." She smiled, quiet and genuine, and for a moment their hands brushed as they crossed the last patch of muddy ground. Inside, the kitchen was chaos once more, but buoyant now. Molly sang as she rolled pastry, and Tommy, hair wild, regaled the staff with the tale of the wagon's salvation. Mrs. Rowley appeared, dusting flour from her skirt, her eyes sharp. "You've made quite a spectacle, Juliana," she said, but there was pride in her voice. "The whole village will know how you faced the trouble." "And who stood beside her?" Molly added, glancing at Lord Ashcombe with a shy smile. Mrs. Rowley's gaze softened as she looked at them both. "When hard times come, we see the measure of a man and a woman. The staff are proud of you, child, and so am I." Juliana felt a warmth rise in her chest, pride, relief, and something softer as she met Ashcombe's eyes. Before she could reply, Tommy burst in from the yard, breathless. "Miss Harrow, old Mrs. Pickering's fallen in the lane. She can't walk, and her boy's nowhere to be found." Juliana's face tightened with worry. She turned to Ashcombe. "Will you come with me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Of course." They hurried together into the dusk, lantern swinging between them. The cold bit at their cheeks, and their boots slipped on the slick moss of the lane. They found Mrs. Pickering, pale and shaking, clutching her ankle by the edge of a stone wall. Juliana knelt, assessing the injury. "It's only sprained, I think. My lord, help me lift her." Ashcombe's grip was gentle but strong, and together they carried the older woman back to the inn, Mrs. Pickering protesting all the way that she was quite fine, thank you, only a fool for taking the shortcut. Once inside, Molly fetched hot tea and blankets, while Juliana and Ashcombe saw to the injured ankle. The staff gathered, murmuring admiration. Even Mrs. Rowley, ever practical, dabbed her eyes. Mrs. Pickering, snug in a chair by the fire, beamed at Juliana. "You're a good girl, Miss Harrow. Your father would be proud. Juliana squeezed her hand, glancing at Ashcombe, who stood quietly nearby, watching her with open admiration. As the evening settled, the inn's doors opened to more villagers, drawn by the news of Juliana's deeds and the warmth that seemed to radiate from the taproom. The staff bustled, the kitchen hummed, and laughter returned to the Harrow. Later, as the last of the village folk drifted home and the candles burned low, Juliana found Ashcombe alone by the fire, rubbing his hands. She sat beside him, the hush between them easy now. "You have earned your supper a dozen times over, my lord." He smiled, a little sheepish. "I am glad to be useful." "It is not a feeling I have often known." She regarded him, her voice soft. "You were more than useful." "I am grateful." They sat in companionable silence, the thrum of the day settling into a gentle peace. But as Juliana rose to tend to the ledgers, Ashcombe caught her hand, just for a moment. "You are remarkable, Juliana Harrow." She looked down at their joined hands, her heart unsteady. "We are both more than what the world expects, my lord." He released her, but his eyes lingered, full of something unspoken. In that quiet, the distance between them shrank, not vanished, but undeniably changed. Tonight, the inn was full again, not just with guests, but with hope, and something warmer still. The Harrow Inn was alive with music and voices as dusk settled, lanterns glowing softly in every window, and laughter spilling out onto the lane. Despite the weak storm of gossip, the villagers had gathered for the promised supper, drawn by tales of Juliana's courage and the nobleman's unlikely efforts. The taproom was full. Even the gentry wives had returned, their curiosity outweighing their caution. The air was thick with the scent of stewed apples, roasting beef, and anticipation. Juliana stood in the doorway, surveying her domain. She watched Tommy dart between tables, cheeks flushed as he recounted the wagon rescue to anyone who would listen. Molly bustled with a tray of cider, smiling shyly at Lord Ashcombe, who stood near the fire, sleeves rolled, carving slices of bread for the guests. The sight of him working among the villagers was still enough to draw whispers, but now the tone was more of wonder than censure. Mrs. Rowley hovered at Juliana's elbow, her knitting forgotten for once. "Look at them all, child. You filled the house again." Juliana smiled, but her gaze was wary. "For tonight, at least." Mrs. Rowley squeezed her arm. "You have turned the tide. Do not let Fenwick or the vicar's wife frighten you." Juliana's answer was lost in the din as the door swung open and Fenwick entered, frost glittering on his coat. He paused, scanning the room, his expression tight, as he took in the crowd and the sight of Lord Ashcombe laughing with the blacksmith's children. He approached Juliana, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You have made your point, I see. But be careful. The more you stand with him, the more you risk. Some will not forgive, however many pies you bake." Juliana's jaw set. "If the cost of kindness is a few lost friends, I will pay it." Fenwick's smile was thin. "Some debts are steeper than you think." With that, he melted into the crowd. The meal was served. Platters of beef and bowls of potatoes passed from hand to hand, the talk warm and boisterous. Ashcombe took his seat beside Juliana, his manner relaxed, but his eyes searching hers. "You have done something remarkable, Miss Harrow," he said, voice pitched low for her alone. "I've never seen such loyalty." She smiled, fatigue and pride mingling in her face. "It is not loyalty to me alone. The Harrow has always stood for the village. My father believed that, and I do too." Ashcombe's hand brushed hers under the table, a fleeting touch that sent a quiet thrill through her. "You are the heart of this place, Juliana." She looked away, cheeks warmed. "You flatter me, my lord." He smiled, but there was earnestness in it. "I only speak what I see." As the meal wound down, the vicar rose to offer a toast. "To Miss Harrow, who has shown us all what it means to be neighbourly, and to her guest, Lord Ashcombe, for his good sport and good sense." A chorus of "Hear, hear" echoed, and even the gentry wives raised their glasses. Fenwick, standing at the edge of the room, watched with a face like thunder. The evening's peace shattered when a sudden crash came from the kitchen. Molly burst into the taproom, eyes wide. "Mr. Fenwick, sir, your carriage driver is in the lane. He's taken ill, coughing something dreadful. They say he collapsed by the trough." Instantly, the mood changed. Guests murmured in alarm. Miss Rowley pressed a hand to her chest. Juliana was already moving toward the door, Ashcombe at her side. In the lane, the driver was pale and shivering, his breath ragged. Fenwick knelt beside him, helpless for once, his authority slipping. Juliana knelt, pressing her hand to the man's brow. "He's burning," she murmured. "Help me get him inside. The kitchen fire is warmest." Ashcombe and Fenwick lifted the driver between them, Molly rushing ahead to clear a bench by the hearth. Juliana gave orders with swift precision: blankets, a basin of water, a dash of spirits from the taproom. The room hushed as she worked, the villagers watching her every move. Fenwick hovered, wringing his gloves. "Can nothing be done?" Juliana wiped the man's brow. "He needs warmth and rest, and someone to sit with him. I'll send for old Mrs. Baines. She knows more of fever than any doctor in these parts." Ashcombe placed a hand on Fenwick's shoulder. "He will be well looked after here. Miss Harrow runs a house that cares for all, stranger or not." Fenwick's face, usually so composed, crumpled with relief. He looked at Juliana, his voice rough. "Thank you. I should have known you would not turn him away." Juliana met his gaze, a quiet challenge there. "We do not close our doors to any in need, Mr. Fenwick, not even when others might." The driver's breathing eased under Juliana's care, and the room, seeing the crisis pass, returned to cautious celebration. The incident, instead of stirring new gossip, had united the guests in admiration. Even the gentry wives whispered approval, and Tommy could be heard boasting that Miss Harrow's never let anyone down, not once. As the crowd thinned, Fenwick lingered in the shadows near the kitchen. When at last he approached Juliana, his manner was different, less certain, less proud. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "You are braver than I knew." Juliana studied him, compassion softening her features. "We all want what is best for the Harrow, Mr. Fenwick, but kindness is not weakness." He nodded, a glimmer of regret in his eyes. "Perhaps I have been too quick to judge. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood your ground." She inclined her head, accepting the olive branch, but neither of them missed the glances exchanged by the staff and villagers as they talked. The old order at the Harrow was shifting, and everyone could feel it. Later, as the guests made their way home, Ashcombe found Juliana by the kitchen door, her face weary but content. "You have changed many minds tonight," he said. She smiled, tired but radiant. "I have only shown them what was always true." He took her hand, this time letting it linger. "Let them talk. I will stand with you as long as you'll have me." Juliana looked up at him, her heart full. "You are welcome here, my lord, for as long as you wish." Their hands entwined, the kitchen fire warming their faces. They stood together in the hush, the course of their story set before them by their own quiet courage. But as the embers faded and the night grew still, Juliana knew the world would not yield so easily. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and a choice neither she nor Ashcombe could delay much longer. The next morning, the Harrow Inn was awash with a golden hush, the kind that follows a night of too much excitement. Juliana moved quietly through the taproom, checking on the fire, exchanging a word with Molly, pausing at the window to watch sunlight melt the last frost from the far fields. Her heart felt lighter, yet uncertainty curled at its edges, for she knew the peace was only borrowed. It did not last. The village was restless, the mood in the air different from simple gossip. By midday, a steady trickle of guests began to arrive for the noon meal, but their voices were strained, their glances meaningful. Mrs. Rowley intercepted Juliana by the pantry, her knitting clutched tight. "Child, be wary," she said low. "There's talk of a meeting Fenwick's doing. He's gathering the gentry and the old guard, says he must preserve the dignity of the Harrow. I suspect he means to embarrass you, or worse." Juliana's mouth tightened. "Let him try. We will be ready." Mrs. Rowley wavered. "You have friends here more now than ever. But some hearts are slow to change, and Fenwick, he is proud and smarting from defeat." Juliana squared her shoulders. "We will serve dinner as planned." The hour arrived, and with it, a thick crowd of villagers and local gentry, the taproom filled to bursting. Fenwick stood among them, flanked by the vicar and two of the biggest landowners. He called for silence, his voice ringing out. "Friends, neighbors," he began, "I must address a matter of concern. The Harrow has long been the pride of our village. But there are those who say its reputation is now at risk. I ask you plainly, is this the house you once knew? A murmur rose. The vicar's wife pursed her lips. Some guests shifted uneasily. Juliana stood at the center of the room, her staff gathered behind her. Lord Ashcombe, standing at her right, watched Fenwick with eyes as cold as steel. Fenwick continued, I do not mean to wound, but when a nobleman lingers among the servants, when the mistress's name is paired in rumor, how are we to hold our heads high before the county? A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Tommy bristled, but Juliana stilled him with a touch. Fenwick pressed on. And so I ask, should the management of the Harrow not be entrusted to a more suitable hand? One whose name is above reproach, whose conduct is beyond question. He looked directly at Juliana, his meaning unmistakable. Silence fell, thick and electric. Juliana stepped forward, her voice clear. You speak, Mr. Fenwick, as if my house belongs to the village, or to the gentry, or to you. But it is mine. My father built it, my mother tended it, and I have kept it standing through storm and scandal alike. A murmur of agreement fluttered from the staff and a few villagers. She went on. If you believe I have failed in my duty, speak plainly. If you wish to take my house, say so, but do not cloak ambition in concern for reputation. A flush appeared on Fenwick's cheeks. I wish only for what is best for you, for the Harrow, for us all. At that, Ashcombe stepped forward, his voice steady and strong. You mistake your own interest for the common good, sir. Miss Harrow has shown more honor and courage than any man here. If this house is worthy, it is because she has made it so. If her reputation is questioned, let the questioners look to their own heart. A stir of approval, louder this time. Mrs. Rowley's eyes shone with tears. Molly and Tommy stood taller. Fenwick, stung, tried again. And what are you to her, my lord? What claim do you make? Ashcombe's gaze did not falter. I make no claim but this. I am her friend, and I stand beside her. I have seen the measure of her heart. The vicar looked from one to the other, uneasy. Let us not quarrel, surely. There is no shame in friendship, but the village must have faith in its own. Juliana lifted her chin. Then let the village judge me by my deeds, not by rumor. Let those I have fed, sheltered, and helped speak now, or hold their peace. A voice piped up from the back, Miss Pickering, her ankle bandaged, her voice quavering but fierce. Miss Harrow saved me and my family, and half this village when the river broke last spring. There's none more loyal. The blacksmith added, and she never turned a soul away, not in the harshest winter. One by one, voices rose testimonies of kindness, fairness, the long memory of good turns. Even the vicar's wife, grudging, admitted, she has never shamed us at her table. The crowd's mood was turning, and Fenwick saw it. He tried one last time, voice sharp. But what of her conduct with Lord Ashcombe? Ashcombe straightened, turned to face them all, and spoke with the calm of a man who had weighed his words carefully. I came to this inn as a stranger, and by my own arrogance, I brought trouble to Miss Harrow's door. I have seen her bear hardship and insult with grace I could never match. If her reputation is at risk, let it be for kindness, not scandal. If there is shame, it is mine to bear. Juliana looked at him, gratitude and something deeper in her eyes. Fenwick, seeing the crowd's sympathy slip away, fell silent. Juliana took a breath. The Harrow stands open to all who come in peace, as it always has. For those who wish to leave, the door is there. For those who wish to stay, you are welcome at my table. A hush, then a great surge of voices, applause, cheers, the sudden bright music of relief. The staff embraced Juliana, Tommy whooping, Molly laughing through tears. Mrs. Rowley folded her close, whispering, You did it, child. You won them. Ashcombe stepped forward. You have more than my respect, Juliana. You have my admiration and my heart. She looked at him, the world narrowing to the two of them for a moment. You are welcome, my lord. Truly welcome. As the supper began anew and music filled the air, Fenwick slipped away, his plans undone. The village had chosen, and so had Juliana publicly, and for all to see. But as the firelight danced on the walls and laughter rose again, Juliana knew one choice remained, and that must be made. Not before the crowd, but heart to heart, before the day was done. The Harrow Inn had never felt so alive. The night supper had become a true celebration, laughter and music carrying out into the frosty air, candles flickering in every window. The tables were crowded with villagers, staff, and even a few gentry who had, at last, set aside their doubts. Plates and tankards clattered, old Mrs. Pickering led a song, and Tommy danced an awkward jig that made the kitchen girls shriek with laughter. The mood was jubilant, the memory of strife fading into something almost fond. Juliana moved among her guests, cheeks aglow, her blue gown bright against the firelight. She poured cider, accepted thanks, and returned every smile. Yet as the evening wore on, she found herself glancing more and more toward the hearth, where Lord Ashcombe stood with Mrs. Rowley, talking softly. He looked perfectly at ease, his presence as natural as if he had always belonged. But every so often, his eyes would find Juliana's across the room, the silent question lingering there. At last, as the hour grew late and the crowd thinned, Ashcombe crossed the taproom to her side. For a moment, they stood quietly together, apart from the laughter and talk. "May I have a word, Miss Harrow?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, leading him through the side door into the garden. The air was sharp and cold, but the moon cast a silver path over the flagstones, and the inn's windows glowed behind them. They walked in silence for a moment, breath clouding between them. Ashcombe stopped beside the old apple tree, the branches bare and beautiful. He turned to her, fidgeting with his signet ring. "I have been thinking, Juliana, about all that has happened since I first arrived." She smiled a little shyly. "It has been a great deal, my lord." He shook his head, a smile flickering. "Nathaniel, please. I have been a fool. More than once, when I offered you that coin, I saw only what I expected to see. I did not understand what it means to truly work, or to truly belong somewhere. But you have shown me." Juliana's breath caught. "You are not the only one who has changed," she said quietly. "I have learned that pride can be a shield, but it can also be a wall. I nearly let it shut out kindness and love." He reached for her hand, holding it gently in both of his. "Juliana, you have given your heart to this house, to your family, and your village. I would be honored if you might also give a piece of it to me." She looked up at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And if I do, what then, Nathaniel?" He smiled. Hope and longing shining through. "Then I would ask if you would have me as your friend, your partner, your husband, if you wish it. I would stay here, help you run the Harrow, learn from you every day. Or we might go anywhere you choose, so long as we are together." Juliana laughed softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I could never leave the Harrow. It is my home, but I would be proud to share it with you." He drew her closer, his hands trembling now. "Then say you will, Juliana, for my heart is yours if you will have it." The answer came easily, as natural as breathing. "Yes, Nathaniel, I will." He bent his head, kissing her softly. The cold forgotten as warmth blossomed between them. A voice rang out from the doorway. Mrs. Rowley, not even attempting to hide her joy. "Come inside, you two. The staff are waiting, and the pudding is burning." Juliana laughed, squeezing Nathaniel's hand as they hurried back inside. The taproom erupted in cheers, Tommy whooping, Molly wiping her eyes, even the gentry clapping. Mrs. Rowley bustled forward, wrapping Juliana in a fierce embrace. "You have made your own happiness, my dear," her aunt whispered. "Your parents would be so proud." Nathaniel, cheeks flushed, took Juliana's hand and turned to face the room. "If I may," he began, raising his voice. "I have come to the Harrow as a stranger, but I leave as family, if Miss Harrow will have me." The applause was thunderous. The vicar, beaming, raised his glass. "Let us toast to Juliana Harrow and Lord Ashcombe. May their union be as strong as this house and as warm as its hearth." The staff gathered round, Molly pressing a sprig of rosemary into Juliana's hand. "For luck." Tommy promising to clean the stables every day for a month. Even Mrs. Pickering hobbled over to press a kiss to Juliana's cheek. As the night wore on, the celebration became a wedding feast in all but name. Nathaniel danced with Juliana beneath the beams, her laughter bright and free. When the music faded and the last guest departed, Juliana and Nathaniel stood in the doorway, watching the village lights wink out one by one. He drew her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You are remarkable," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me truly." She smiled, her heart full. "Thank you for finding your way home." Side by side, they turned back into the warmth and promise of the Harrow Inn, knowing that together they had claimed more than victory over gossip or pride. They had won love, and a place where they both belonged.